Welcome to Pickup's On The Move podcast. Today we have Andrew Gold in the studio with us. Andrew and I went to school together many years ago, and recently we connected over business, had some really cool business strategies. We chatted, and here you are today. Andrew, welcome to Pickup's On The Move podcast. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to chat about my journey. Excited, thank you.
Well, your journey has definitely taken the world by storm. Every time I go down to my local bootlegger, I see your brand in everywhere, on everyone. Truly amazing story. Andrew, tell me a little bit more about how it all came to be.
I grew up into manufacturing. My dad started a business that was making backpacks back in 1978, and that was the year I was born. And then I grew up into that industry, and then obviously I left school, and when I came back from overseas after doing the 2-year thing overseas, my dad had then started another business making sleeping bags and outdoor clothing. And I joined him in that business, and while I was in that business, I studied fashion design and production management, and learned a lot on the job. And then when I exited that business, after selling it, I took some time off and took my kids around the States, and I had an idea, either going to be coffee or something else. And I told myself, and this is the interesting part, I told myself, never production ever again. But I came back from overseas, and I had this logo, an Italian Italian-looking logo, Italian sounding name, and it was either going to be a coffee business or something else. And after watching the Giro d'Italia, which is a very famous Italian cycling race, it came to me, and I was like, no, I know what I do, and that's what I know what I'm good at, and that's creating product. And so after watching that race, it's like, no, I need to do cycling. I like cycling personally. It's a passion of mine, and I'm sort of blending my skills with cycling and apparel and what I know into what today is Chavita.
While at the bootlegger, you get different ways that people pronounce it. Can you tell us a little bit more? Tell us how to pronounce it as you have come up with it, and what is the meaning behind the name?
As I said, I had this logo, and so I knew the name needed to start with a C. I had the C logo in my mind, and literally some late nights with an Italian dictionary and a Latin dictionary. And so the name is actually two words, Vita, as in like a Pro Vita biscuit, or means life, and that's Italian. And then the CIO, which is pronounced Cio in Latin, means to move. So it's a combination of Latin and Italian words, and together it means life in motion, which is fitting for a cycling brand. The unique thing about it, which I didn't realize at the time, was that although I've taken two words, one being Latin and one being Italian, that word in the dictionary doesn't exist. So it's been really good for us for a Google ranking. But when I've traveled to Italy, and the reason for the Italian name was Italians epitomize everything about passion and design. And so if you think about Italian, it's Ferrari, it's Vespa, it's espresso. And that was the reason for the Italian theme around the brand. But when you travel to Italy and you speak to Italians, they can put the two together and they go, Chavita. So it's pronounced like this, Chavita. But it has become a talking point, and it's actually one of the things that we like it when people mispronounce the name.
Sure.
Because you might say Chiovita, someone says Clovita, and then you have a conversation about our brand. So
absolutely brilliant, yeah. And it's while you're on your trip, how long was that journey from the time sort of the idea popped in your mind to to coming up with a name and then this light bulb moment that it all starts sort of becoming real, or the idea starts forming in your mind? Like, how long was that time period?
Sure, I want to say long. I think you'll know as an entrepreneur, your mind's always racing, and you might be busy with one thing and then you have another idea in your mind about something else that could be. So I took 6 months off with my family. It was the best 6 months of my life. We traveled around the States in an RV, and actually fortunately went back a year later and did the same thing for a month. And it was a special time in my life with my kids. So that journey was 6 months of me reflecting of what's the next thing gonna be. And I had a list on my phone, I've still got it, of 20 things I could do with my skill set. And the one that stood out the most was, hey, you're good at producing product. You know how to produce product. You like cycling. Why not put those two together? And that's so when I came back, in fact, even during the journey, I was, sort of 3 months into our overseas trip, I was like already buying samples overseas and seeing what was happening out there. And so kind of on that trip, I knew what was going to happen in 3 months later when I got back to South Africa.
Amazing, amazing. And that, in my previous podcasts, I've spoken about passion or opportunity. Entrepreneurs either are really passionate about something and they stitch the idea together, or they see a gap in the market for something, they put the team, they put the concept together and they sort of make it work. Clearly yours is all about passion. And tell us more about from the time from that light bulb moment to actually touching it. Like how long was that journey and what did it take? What were some of the challenges you need to go through to actually see that this is now a business, this is now a product?
Yeah. So I think as Mike Tyson says, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And so I got punched in the face on day one. We rented this building. I had bought some machinery. I traveled to China to buy the machinery. So you need specialized machinery to produce the type of apparel that we are producing. So you need special printing machines and transferring machines. And those weren't readily available 10 years ago. And so I traveled to China and bought the machinery and then rented what you would call not quite a garage, but a studio type of environment. And when I got the keys, I looked at this place and I thought, how are we going to get the machines in this place? And there was a window and I was working out, okay, we're going to have to cut the window out, get the crane to bring the machine in. And luckily I had a very, very accommodating landlord. And he said, well, why don't you rather just rent my building down the road? And so we were in the first building for literally 24 hours. And then we moved to the second building where luckily it was on the ground floor and the machinery could come in. So that was the first smack in the face, but one that really worked out. And I think there are some moments where you're lucky and you have opportunities and some breaks. And that was a lucky break because I could have been stuck in a fight with a landlord in a space that was too small for us. But his name was Mike, so I really appreciate Mike for helping me out. And then other setbacks were originally when I started the brand, I wasn't quite sure exactly what our niche was going to be. I knew it was going to be cycling. But as we got going, I found there was this desire for brands, cycling brands, cycling teams who are cycling in these events for smaller runs. And so at the time, most people were having goods made in China. And so those volumes are very high and it's difficult to negotiate on minimums. And so you'd have teams entering the Absa Cape Epic F&B wines to Wales, and they would need kit. But perhaps it was only a team of 2 people, so you need 4 jerseys, 1 gilet, and that you can't do in China. So we very quickly became more of a bespoke brand, making smaller runs, and we could pivot because we could do not only custom kit for teams, events, and corporates, but also our own retail range, which has slowly grown and now is the biggest part of our business, is this retail range, Chivita.
Those early stages when you know, that light from, again, I'd say that light bulb moment, it starts, you move the machinery in through the window, you start going and you've got this vision of building a product, cycling kit. And then it's, okay, now we need to sell it. You spoke now of like focusing on a niche part of the market. I know with the Yoko guys, when they started, they focused mainly on on markets because they had the vendors there, it's the business owner, they needed a card machine. You mentioned developing the product for cycling clubs, or did you weave your way into it? Did it just come about, or did you sit with a team and actually say, okay, well, this is where we need to go, let's focus on this. It's not quite ready for retail yet. This is where we need to try and make profit. How did that journey happen?
Yeah, sure. So the journey really started, we had our first, let's call it production order, which was for the Absa Cape Epic in 2016. It was for 2 teams, and those were our first ever 2 orders that we produced. And the one was, we made kits for GoPro. There's a GoPro cycling team. And I guess that got us some exposure. So that, again, another lucky moment. As Gary Player says, the more you practice, the luckier you get. So we practice a lot. And so that was a good break for us. We got some good exposure out of that. And the nice thing with what we found with working with teams is that one order leads to another one and leads to another one. And it has like this multiplier effect. So we would do kits for, say, GoPro. And at the time, GoPro had a distribution partner, and then the next week we had an order from their 2 brands, and that kind of spiraled. And so that was great. In terms of the retail side of things, again, we had some lucky moments. There was a brand that was supplying the F&B wines to Wales, and that brand let them down. And I previously knew the director of Wines to Wales, and he reached out to me and he said, look, we've had these challenges. Would you be interested in manufacturing the leaders' jerseys for Wines to Wales? And I was like, sure. So immediately, like, we're this small business, and all of a sudden you've got this big order. And we had the same, we did with the Cape Town Cycle Tour. We got an order for Nedbank, 1,500 cycling jerseys. So those 2 moments immediately lead to, F&B Wines to Wales have 3,000 to 3,500 cyclists wearing our brand. Cape Town Cycle Tour immediately had 1.5 cyclists wearing a Nedbank cycling jersey. So those moments are pivotal in our journey because immediately they expose our brand to a wider audience. And then we met with a retail player in the cycling industry in South Africa. It's quite a big retail entity called the Cycle Lab, and they were also instrumental in our growth, and we have a very good relationship with them because they have stores in each region of South Africa, which has been good for our penetration into other areas in South Africa. And then on top of that, we have a direct-to-consumer approach where you could come onto our website and purchase directly from us. You'll pay the same price as what you'll pay in a Cycle Lab or in one of the independent bike stores, but it's very challenging these days with our brand that's grown so much for one cycle shop to carry the entire range. We've got tri-suits, speed suits, short sleeve, long sleeve, different types of fits. The range is very wide.
And there's this perception that South African brands are not quite what international brands are because of the quality of the materials and the skill sets in the country. From what you've just said, it's the same. It's about your passion for the product and your desire to put together the best product. We can do it here. That perception, what is your feeling around that, and what is your advice to other entrepreneurs in the same industry? So what is your advice for some of them?
Certain South African products or brands maybe aren't perceived to be as good as an American brand or a brand that's made in Europe. And that actually was the sole reason why I chose the name Chivita. It didn't sound like a South African brand. And to this day, many people, they still believe the brand is from Italy. So it's worked for us, and we've invested heavily in technology. So in terms of our machinery that we use the best machinery. We've actually, in the clothing industry, one of the biggest challenges in the last sort of 15 years has been an aging workforce. So in Cape Town, which used to employ upwards of 200,000 people in the sewing industry, in the early 2000s and late 1990s, when a lot of the retailers went and had their product made in China, that industry suffered and shrank. And with it, a lot of skill was lost. So that's been one of the challenges, is to get that skill back, because those people are still around, they still exist. But the challenge is that for a lot of people, they don't see a sewing job as their career. So what we've done at Chivita is, in our own factory, we've developed a training school where we take matriculants or people that have a desire to enter the industry and want to just feel it out. And we put them through a 3-month course. And at the end of the course, they get to decide, is this something that you would like to do for the rest of your life? Can you do it? Do you have the skills to do it? Because it needs some type of dexterity to work a sewing machine, it needs some type of skill. And then some of them, because we primarily try and take matriculants, even if they decide they can't work a sewing machine or it's maybe not for them, we can try and deploy them in other areas of our business, maybe working some tech on the computer or some other type of job within our business.
An interesting thing in one of our other conversations, and it's an amazing discussion point really, is you say almost all of your products are manufactured locally.
I think you've got to stick to your knitting, excuse the pun. So you've got to stick to what you're good at. So we've developed a factory that's really, really good at producing cycling apparel. So we don't produce tracksuits and t-shirts. We might sell t-shirts, but we actually work with a partner that produces our t-shirts for us. So we're not a t-shirt manufacturer. That's cottons and different way of manufacturing. Whereas working with lycras that are really stretchy, you need to have the right machinery. That machinery, even though it's a sewing machine, has to be set up to work on those specific fabrics, that they stretch right and they don't feel uncomfortable when you're wearing them. You can't suddenly now change your line from day to day. One day you're making t-shirts, the next day you're making shorts, the next day you're making jackets. So we strategically have, in our own factory, we have lines that are set up to make one particular product. And we have a set of skilled machinists that are responsible for doing a particular role on that product.
And you mentioned training. It's remarkable how much you're investing in sort of creating more jobs in Cape Town. Your passion, product, business acumen, going in and actually building a culture of people. Tell us more about how you've developed that, training schools, and the people you've needed to actually put these together day to day.
I think that's a very important point you make, because it's not just me. You know, I might have started the business, but with me, I've brought along people. So I have a very good bunch of partners in the business that understand their roles. I've surrounded myself with people that potentially are cleverer than myself in certain aspects. You know, I think whilst I might be the creative one that has ideas, I've realized over the years you need to sow that seed with those people you surround yourself with, and then let them run with it. And it's taken me a long time to actually realize that, because when you're starting a business and you are sometimes jack of all trades, you stick your nose in areas where you actually should leave other people to do it themselves. It's their expertise, and focus on what actually drives the business forward. So in my sort of journey in Chivita, I've realized that one of my strengths is product. So I can give the design team direction. And these days we have a significant sized design team that has, you know, design director, creative director, you know, fabric people, whole bunch. And my role is merely just to give them guidance and not to stick my nose into things too far. And in strategy, yes, we together with my executive team, we come up with a strategy, which, you know, you'll know as a business owner yourself, sometimes that strategy needs to be adaptable. And then from a leadership role, I think that's the biggest lesson I'm still learning, is that as a leader, you have to give your staff the recognition they deserve. Every single day there's a challenge, and some of them are big challenges and some of them are small challenges, and together we've got a culture of dealing with those challenges. So whether it's a roll of fabric that the supplier sent was 50 meters and you've actually realized, no, it's now 48 meters, but you've started, you know, laying it up and now you're short, and what do? You know, so that's a small challenge. There's some bigger challenges that we also have to rise up to. I can't solve all those challenges. I need a team around me that can solve those challenges, and I need to listen to what they're presenting and either agree or disagree. And I'm learning these days, I agree more than I disagree.
Yeah, and from that, you know, being the visionary behind the brand, you go through those stages, those early stages. The business starts kicking. You find your route to market being manufacturing for your clubs and small groups of people. Going into retail, you start scaling the business. I definitely also found that at some point you need to start investing more in the people, stronger management, executives to join the business and collaborate with you to execute your vision. So I really resonate with what you're saying there. You're in the years now, the brand is, like you said, like internationally starting to become recognized. Yeah. Sales, local sales versus international sales. Like you said, you were selling to people that popped an email and were manufacturing for the local event. How did you develop your strategy around online versus retail sales? Tell us a bit more about like what the growth of obviously online and the retail sales. Where is your focus? Is it retail, online, and how is that all going?
Currently have a very diverse offering. Like we call it omni-channel. So on our website, in our own retail stores, in independent bike stores, and like in a chain of stores like the Cycle Lab. We always developed our brand to be positioned as a direct-to-consumer brand, and that's over the years has changed slightly. We certainly value our retailers, and every week we get requests from other retailers in South Africa. Please, can we stock your brand? Please, can we stock your brand? And we've been very selective because we need to, first of all, acknowledge the retailers that have come with us along this journey, and keep our product exclusive. As we now enter an international market, we're finding it challenging. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. So we're busy developing our market in Australia. It's a big market for us at the moment. It's a big focus for us. And there it's more of a direct-to-consumer approach because bike shops, they're very concerned about selling the bikes and not necessarily the clothing. So for a bike shop, it's all about the bike. And clothing is often a second decision-making aspect for them. We have recently signed 2 or 3 retailers, which is great for our business because we get exposure through those retailers. And eventually, if we could have the same model in each country, where we have a bit of our own direct-to-consumer, a bit of retail, and a bit of custom, that would be our desire.
Well, certainly, I think you're developing a recipe for a lot of South African companies that would certainly like to learn and understand how you're doing this. And perhaps another podcast in a couple of years when we, certainly when you've launched in most countries. I'm sure we're going to soon see Jovita on in the Tour de France. The international markets, quickly before we wrap up, where you mentioned Australia, how do you start, I know David Chait, Okia, just recently, he was on one of my first podcasts. He just recently launched his product in the UK. Big focus for him was to get his product internationally. I know and understand that it's a big focus for you now. How did you said Australia, how do you start the process? Is it relationships? Is it people? Or is it just pick a country and get started there?
Life throws you lemons, you've got to make lemonade. And so if you want to enter a market, you've got to decide how are we going to do it? There's a desire for us as our brand in Australia. People are wanting our brand. We can't send individual orders from South Africa to Australia. That shipping will kill us. So you've got to find a way to warehouse product there. And so for a long time, you've got to tread water until you can figure out, are you going to sink or are you going to swim? So we're in that position in a few markets. So it's not easy. There are challenges. I think from the outside, everything looks like it's rosy. It's it's like Facebook. Everyone's always on holiday on Facebook, always having a good time. But business is a lot of challenges, and you've got to be willing to accept those challenges. And I think that's what makes good brands great.
Excellent. Well, Andrew, I must say I really commend you and what you've done, your passion for an unbelievable product. I love going to the local bootlegger. Every time there's a cyclist, most of them are wearing your brand. Congratulations, well done. I hope to see next year or the year after in these big international cycle events. I'm sure we'll see the Jovita brand flying high and flying the flag. I'm certainly got my kit, and every Sunday I'm out on my bike. So amazing! Congratulations! Thanks for joining us today, and good luck.
Thanks very much. Cheers.